Today, we're diving into something pretty wild. It's a letter that popped up online back in 2011, and it claims to be from the ghost of Muammar Gaddafi writing to the king of Bhutan. Yeah, it's a strange, fascinating story about history, satire, and a past that is very, very contested. Right out of the gate, the letter hits you with this. I mean, just imagine you're the young king of Bhutan. You've just gotten married, and you see this message. It brings up the gruesome televised death of Gaddafi and says, hey, you and I, we're in the same category. Talk about a surreal and kind of threatening way to start a letter. So that's the big question, right? Why on earth would the ghost of Libya's infamous dictator be sending a message to the king and queen of a remote kingdom in the Himalayas? It sounds like total nonsense, but as we're about to see, there was a very specific, calculated reason for this bizarre setup. Okay, let's actually dig into the letter itself. It was published just a few days after Gaddafi was killed in October 2011, and it's addressed straight to Bhutan's king and his new queen. So, the whole idea, the main point here, is a warning. The author, speaking as Gaddafi's ghost, is basically saying, hey, look what happened to me. I was dragged out of a ditch and killed by my own people. You better learn from my mistakes before you end up the same way. And this line right here, it just perfectly sums up that threat. The author is using Gaddafi's voice to tell the king, point blank, to fix the flaws of his father's time in power. The message is not subtle at all. Change things, or you could end up like me. And wow, the letter gets specific. This isn't just some vague threat. It's a laundry list of serious accusations. The author, pretending to be Gaddafi, talks about a huge chunk of Bhutan's population being evicted, slams a policy called One Nation, One People, and even calls Bhutan's famous idea of gross national happiness a joke. I mean, these are incredibly serious charges to level against a country. Okay, so here's the thing. These accusations, they weren't just pulled out of thin air. They're all pointing to a very real and very painful chapter in Bhutan's modern history. That's the real story bubbling just under the surface of this whole ghost thing. So, one of the key policies the letter mentions is Driglam Namja. This was a real code of conduct that was pushed in the 1980s. Now, supporters would say it was about creating a unified national identity, but its critics, especially the Nepali-speaking minority, the Lhotshampa, felt like it was designed to completely erase their own culture. And this timeline really puts it all into context. You can see how the letter's claims map directly onto the real-life events of the Bhutanese refugee crisis. You see the progression, right? First, the Nepali language is pushed out of schools. Then the One Nation, One People policy gets enforced, which leads to huge protests, and then a mass exodus of over 100,000 people who ended up in refugee camps. All right, so you can probably guess what happened when this letter hit the internet back in 2011. It was like dropping a bombshell. The comments section just exploded into this huge, heated debate, and it really showed how raw these old wounds still were. So on one side, you had comments like this one. Bhagirath Kadiwada clearly thought the letter was a brilliant piece of satire, even calling it excellent. And then you get this. On the complete opposite end of the spectrum, you have this incredibly visceral, angry reaction from someone named Sukistra. I mean, the rage is just jumping off the screen. The whiplash between these two comments is pretty intense. Here's another voice in support of it. This person felt the letter hit its mark, calling it a simple but very strong message. For readers like this, the whole ghost idea worked perfectly. But for others, like Lotus Flower, this wasn't about politics or history. It was a direct personal attack. They saw it as an insult to our king and the queen. Simple as that. So what you see unfolding here are two completely different realities, built from the exact same words. One group saw this as powerful, brave satire telling a hidden story. The other group saw it as a treasonous insult to their country, their king, and a total distortion of history. And this comment from a user named Zach really gets to the core of that second narrative. The fundamental argument here is that the people who left weren't actual Bhutanese in the first place. They're seen as having a Nepali identity, and so the government's actions were justified. This right here is the central point where the two versions of history just completely diverge. Which brings us all the way back to our ghost. After all the fire and fury this letter stirred up, you have to ask, who was the ghost in the machine? Well, it turns out the answer wasn't really a mystery. It was hiding in plain sight. Right at the bottom of the article, a byline identifies the writer. not as a ghost, but as the editor of the website BhutaneseLiterature.com. So, there you have it. This wasn't a supernatural message. It was a very deliberate, very calculated piece of political satire. It was written by a Bhutanese writer, almost certainly living in exile as part of the refugee community, who used this absolutely shocking premise to grab people's attention and force a conversation about a really painful part of history. And let's not forget the sheer scale of what this letter is talking about. The author keeps coming back to this jaw-dropping figure: 1/6 of the entire country's population forced out of their homes. Now, whether you agree with that number or not, it's designed to shock you, to make you see the events of the 1990s as nothing less than a national catastrophe. And that really leaves us with a big question, doesn't it? The author clearly knew that a regular old essay wouldn't get anywhere near the reaction that a letter from Gaddafi's ghost would. So it makes you wonder, when a group of people feel like their story has been totally erased from the official history books, does provocative satire like this become more than just an artistic choice? Does it become a necessary weapon?